Welcome to Fueling Conversations, a sport, nutrition, education network podcast with Dr. James Fleming. In this episode, we sit down with Rowan, a former long-distance runner, to explore the highs and lows of his athletic journey. Rowan reflects on his rapid rise in distance running, clocking an impressive 2:26 in his first marathon at the age of just 19, and the intense training demands that come with it. He opens up about the transition into competitive university running and the physical and mental challenges he faced, including injury and his battle with an eating disorder. This conversation sheds light on the often unspoken pressures young athletes experience, the misconceptions around performance and body image, and the importance of taking balanced, sustainable approaches to sport and nutrition. Rowan's honest reflection offers valuable lessons for athletes, coaches, and practitioners alike. Let's get into it. Hi, Rowan. Thanks for joining me. Really excited to have you on today. And as I said, this is kind of an interesting one today because normally we talk to athletes, and we spoke to Ellis, your mate, about how he's getting on with his Team Macau stuff. And today we're going to kind of talk about your retrospective kind of insights. So yeah, welcome to the podcast. If you don't mind introducing yourself a little bit, what you currently do, what you used to do, and then we'll delve into your sporting achievement of note.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Rowan. I currently work for a sports brand called On in sports marketing. So really love my job, and definitely my kind of former career enabled me to get this job. So previously I used to be a long distance runner. So I kind of worked that around obviously all my studies and stuff. Competed at a decent level, managed 2:26 marathon, relatively high up in most of the national kind of competitions. Never really represented anything internationally, but I feel like had I maybe gone on a little bit further, that definitely was achievable. But yeah, growing up, loved all sports, but definitely running was my main thing.
Cool. Can we go right back then? So, like we did with Ellis, how did you get into running, and then how did you get to that 2:26 marathon, which you're going to spend a bit more time on later?
Yeah, so I think for me, I was really lucky because I had parents that kind of pushed me in to most things just to kind of try everything out and see how I kind of, got on really. And sport was definitely the main thing for me. So originally it was kind of football, bit of tennis, that kind of thing. And then I was in the right area. I kind of went to a sport specific, like secondary school anyway, where sport was quite a big thing there. So we had access to a lot, and it coincided with the running track being built at our school as well. So I thought I'd try my hand at athletics, hated it, absolutely hated it because at that age they kind of push you to do all the kind of events, and I was small, didn't really enjoy throwing, couldn't really jump very well. And I basically just said to him, I was like, I can only really come to athletics if you let me run because I'm not really enjoying anything else. So I actually persevered and kept going on, kept going on. And then eventually it became a bit more event specific. So I was able to do, the odd race, a little bit more running specific training, but mainly still playing football. So I wasn't really training as such. It was just the odd session here or there. And I think a lot of it is down to natural talent because I had quite a bit of success early on. I think as I started to kind of move through the age groups a little bit, I realized that football was never going to be something I was going to make it in, even though I really wanted to. And I had to kind of put that by the wayside and decide because a lot of the fixtures clashed. So it was either running or football, really. It was hard to do both. So I decided to then kind of go into the running. And then through the kind of under 13, under 15, under 17, I was having a lot of success, was regularly top 10, top 15 at your kind of regional, national kind of champs as well. So I was kind of on the map and definitely someone that could kind of push on as I got older. And then obviously things we'll probably allude to in a little bit. I had a few issues and stuff, and it made it tricky to progress in the right way. So that it was a little bit turbulent going between kind of my junior ranks into university. But as we said, kind of at university, I did kind of get things together, which enabled me to then go on to run probably quite stupidly at quite a young age to run a marathon. I mean, it was a successful marathon, went super well, but I think my mindset, probably not a very healthy one, was partly the reason I was able to do well in the marathon because I was so fixated on the sport by that point. It was basically I just locked in, whereas others may have sensibly chosen not to do a marathon. I was able just to kind of switch off all the kind of negative connotations around doing a marathon at that age. So I think for good and bad, I ended up in that position doing that race.
Lovely. We'll talk into the marathon in a bit and all that because for the listener, I'm not sure how many people know about kind of why people don't do marathons at a young age. So we'll touch on that in a second. When you spoke about the national age groups from 13, 14, 15, what sort of distances were you doing and what did the training look like?
Yeah, so I think under 13 stuff when you're 12, you're pretty young, so the distances are really short. So even over the kind of cross country circuit, you're probably only running around 3 kilometers. I mean, and at that age, most of the good runners aren't doing that much training. It's basically around who is the most naturally talented, who might be doing other sports, so they're kind of just generally relatively fit. And at that age, probably going to the club 3 times a week, and that was probably about it. The rest of the time was just be filled with other sports. It was only as I started to move towards kind of 14, 15, where it became a little bit more specific. So I was probably doing your 2 or 3 sessions a week down at the club, which the coach would set. And then outside of that, I was doing my own running as well. But then obviously still doing other sports alongside that. Although I wasn't focusing on them as such, I was still kind of playing the odd football match, that kind of thing. So generally across the week, I was probably doing sport 7 days a week. So just in terms of like a natural fitness, you kind of had that. And at the under 15 age groups, the distances, they're probably only 5K. You're not running that far. So your overall volume of a week in training for most people at that age, and you're growing, is just not that high. And for me, it was only as I started to move to under 17 and up to kind of like your under 20 age group, where again, I think because of the problems I had, it kind of made me ramp up my training when I probably didn't need to. Because obviously the distances do go up, but you're still not even a senior yet. So I think it's a tough age group because your training is going to go up, but I think you can very quickly do too much, which is what I found, I think.
So how did you navigate? You said you're young, you're naturally pretty good. You're doing loads of sport. It's actually a good thing from kind of an injury prevention perspective. And then how did you ever get to the idea that I'm going to go from like a 5K, not that much specific running, to then 3, 4 years later, dropping the football, I assume, and then getting into a marathon kind of distance? How did that come around?
Yeah, so a whole load of things. I think I just became a little bit hungrier for success. And I think once I got to kind of 16, 17, I completely switched on to the fact that I was good at running and that more training led to better performances. I think when you're younger, you don't really think about it like that. You just think, oh, I'm good at running. I do a little bit of training. I'll be this good. Whereas I think as you get older, you start to realize almost like the science of it. The more running I do to a certain extent, the better I'll be. Practice makes perfect, doesn't it? So I think in my head, I was kind of beginning to think like that, which again is in the right mindset, that's a good way of thinking. But I think I probably just went overboard with it. And I think when I then went to university, I was already doing quite a high volume of training, which obviously lent itself to being able to be like, oh, I'm going to do a marathon in my second year because I'm already doing this amount of running. I'm obviously clearly fit. I was very light at the time, so obviously a marathon makes sense. And like university, you're an adult, so you can kind of make your own decisions. And obviously, people were suggesting it, and me being me, I was just, I can do that 100%, no questions asked. And I think, it's in hindsight not the best thing, but at the time, with where I was at, in my head, it made logical sense.
And was that something your coach was aware of? So you mentioned you were doing a lot of load at the time. How much was a normal load before you did that transition to marathon running?
Yeah, so I think before I came to university, I was probably doing 60 or so miles a week. But the problem I had is though most of those miles were quality miles, there wasn't much easy running in there. A lot of it was just hard running. So the volume doesn't sound that much in comparison to other things I've been doing at other years, but it was just, and I was doing more specific S and C outside of that. Nothing mad, but just running specific S and C. So a lot of stuff that just over the whole week, my training load was probably quite high. By that point, I dropped all the other sports, which was obviously a good thing. But running specific was pretty high. And then when I got to uni, obviously I was trying to take that up a little bit higher. So, you're more at your 70, 75 miles a week. And then by the year I was doing the London Marathon. So when I was 19, 20, I few 90-mile weeks, a couple of 100-mile weeks as well.
Tell me if I'm wrong here, Rowan, that's not uncommon. That mileage isn't uncommon because we have our elite performance center at St
Exactly,
Mary's.
yeah. So
And runners are typically doing 60, 70 miles without,
yeah. I think there's a common misconception that everyone that runs high mileage is unhealthy or doing it wrong. Absolutely not. Like mileage is super, super important to run, especially nowadays. The training has moved on so much, but they train a little bit more sensibly, so you can do higher mileage. Whereas again, I wasn't really training very sensibly. My 90, 100-mile weeks were pretty much made of, it was just unsustainable because the quality of running in it was just all so high. I was doing sessions, but also my runs outside of that were just too quick. Everything was just, oh, I have to do this like this because otherwise I'm not going to improve from the last week. So yeah, in terms of mileage volume, not a problem. Like people can handle that. Your Ellis on a 100-mile week, he's an animal because he's looks after himself in the right way. He's not that injury prone. Things like that lend itself to him being a very good athlete off of that, and he doesn't have any other hang-ups. But I think if you mix 100-mile weeks with even a slight issue, I think that's when you're asking for problems.
I guess the big thing here is that you've gone 100 miles a week, you've moved away from home. We haven't even spoke about nutrition yet at all.
Yeah.
But that's quite like alarm bells anyway. You're going into an environment that's got, if people aren't aware, that St Mary's have got, Olympians in at the time when you were there. And it's quite common for good quality athletes to come in and go, well, I want to be as good as these guys or girls, so therefore I'm going to chase them. And I'm not, and I even though my coach is saying this is a sub-max session, whatever it is, excuse my lack of knowledge, like people, it's hard to switch that and actually trust the process when you're going, well, I can run alongside an Olympian.
I think St Mary's is one of the worst places to go if you have any doubts about yourself, because I went from being in Taunton, where I was the runner boy because I had achieved far more than most people had around here. And then you go to St Mary's, where no matter how good you are not the best. You're going to a university that Mo Farah used to go to. So I was going into halls with 20 other runners, and I was a great athlete, but I had European champs, people that have now moved on to do some really, really good things. So for me, I was great, and if I'd gone to another area, I'd be like, wow, he's a phenomenal athlete. But in that environment, you're just another number. That
Yeah.
university has seen absolutely anyone you can think of in terms of talent. So I found that pretty hard to deal with. I mean, it was fine. I backed myself and everything, but it was hard to go into that environment, having come from quite a small town and a small club and being relatively successful. Yeah,
And I guess that's the unknown stuff, right? So, come to St Mary's, not just St Mary's. I mean, I'll probably lose my job saying that don't go like anything bad about St Mary's. So be careful on that. I'll caveat, it's a great place to go, of course.
unbelievable university. I absolutely love St. Mary. It was, in hindsight, St. Mary's was the best place for me to go, 100%. For the in terms of what it's done for me afterwards now, 100%.
But I guess it's one of those things, right? So whether it's St Mary's or Birmingham's got a great setup, Loughborough's always been good. The natural thing is that you go there, you aspire to be there, you
Yeah.
get there, and is there ever that kind of care in terms of that transition phase? And maybe not. We can only kind of anecdotally kind of share our experiences, but it's something that you think about young, still adolescent athletes pushed into an environment which is highly competitive. The reality of professional sport is sink or swim in some cases, and wonder whether we're missing a trick there with regards to kind of that psychological transition space as well as nutritional S&C and all the other bits. Yeah,
I
just a
think
thought.
um I think it's the nature of the sport though as well. I think running is one of those sports where it's a tough sport as it is. Then you're going to go away to university where you are thrown into an environment. There is so much going on around you, and then you're trying to keep up your running. You're trying to build your running. You're seeing everyone else, especially at a university where running's quite high up on the priority list. It's a hard environment to be anyway. Anyone just leaving home for the first time. But to be honest with you, some people thrive on that. I mean, I was lucky with who I went to university with, because those guys didn't have the sort of hang-ups that I did.
Mhm.
So a lot of people, they actually do thrive in that environment because it's almost like a fresh start. They can really focus on their training. They're going to a university where running's up here. A lot of other universities, they don't have a running team, they don't have running specific coaches. So actually, although I think for certain people it's probably tough, I think for other people they go there and absolutely thrive.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think, and that's where, when we're talking about high performance athletes, this is often what's associated with it. It's that sacrifice in making those right decisions, is asking the right questions. So should we delve into that? We've kind of nudged on it. I'm sure the listeners are thinking, what's he talking about here? So can you talk about the marathon, where you finished in that marathon, how it all came around? Were you in the running kind of club entrance and then we'll talk about the fueling on that day and then we'll delve into the rest.
Yeah, so 2016, well, actually Christmas 2015, we went for like a meal with all our team, and my coach jokingly suggested that I should do the marathon, and I was like, oh, no way, I'm not. That's a silly idea. And then it got to like January, February time, and I was in pretty good shape, and I was just like generally like really fit. I almost felt like I couldn't do anything wrong. Almost like most athletes will have that time where they get so fit and everything's going so well, they almost feel a little bit invincible. And I was like, you know what? Like, if I can get an entry here, I could 100%. Because to me, I was just in my head, I was like, I just treat it as a long run because I'm really fit. I can 100% run that distance, even though I'd never run anywhere near that distance. I think you just almost throw yourself into a kind of, oh, yeah, that'll be easy. And then weirdly, we managed to get a contact who was able to get me into the championship start, because obviously it's quite late on to be getting a place for London. And all they said to me was, you can have a place in the starting lineup, but you need to be able to run under 75 minutes for a half marathon because that's what the entry time is, and I'd never run a half. So I rushed in March to run a half marathon just as like a training run because I was like that time I could definitely run. So I went there, ran 70 minutes and obviously got the entry. And this was in March, bearing in mind the marathon was in April. So I only confirmed my place in March. And then we went away to Font Romeu, which is an altitude training camp. So basically had barely any time. So I was basically out there for 4 weeks. And up until that point, all my long runs were 13 miles. So I was thinking, like, this is great. I'm fit, but I've not run that far. So I did a 16 miler and a 20 miler when I was in Font. And once I did the 20 mile, I was like, that's it. I'm 100% set. I can do this because I was in great shape and I just was in that kind of, as long as I didn't get injured, I'd be fine. So once I'd done that, I was like, you know what? I'll be absolutely fine for the marathon. And then, so yeah, I was in the championship start, which pretty much just behind the kind of like elites. Finished 39th overall, it's hard to see on the thing it says 39th, but I think if you involve some elites, I think I was 61st. So pretty good. And I ran it negative. That was a negative split, which again, for those that have done a marathon, it's quite hard to run a negative split. So for me, I probably had a lot more of an enjoyable experience
Can you
than
explain what negative split means, please?
yeah. So you run the second half quicker than you do for the first half. And obviously it's quite hard to do because a marathon is a long way. But I think again, one thing I will say about that is because I was in such good shape, I basically probably went off too slow in a way because I was a bit worried about the distance. I was like, I'll be happy with a sub 2:30 because it's my first one. And then when I got to halfway, I was like, I feel unbelievable. Like I feel just like I'm barely moving here, really, which again is a great feeling. And to be honest with you, I always say this, people say this to Ellis a lot. I was like, I've run harder 5Ks than I did for that marathon. Like some of the 5Ks I've done have been a lot harder than the marathon. But I think that's purely because again, on the day I probably could have run a little bit quicker than I actually did. I think just because it was my first one. Again, the morning of the race, I'd never done a marathon. I started to get a little bit fearful of the distance. So I was like, you know what? I'll be happy with a sub 2:30. We'll just get round sort of thing. And then by the end, I was like, you know what? Like I'm in really, really good shape here. This felt great. I felt so I enjoyed the whole thing, which for me was ideal. Like I remember a lot of it. I enjoyed it. It was yeah, it was good.
And what did you fuel during the day? Did you have a strategy? Was it just talk us through your prep day before
There
and day
was zero prep other than day before. Just I was like, I need some obviously a decent amount of carbs. So obviously I was snacking on things like serene malt loaf, stuff like that through the day, and then obviously pasta the night before. But again, that wasn't for me. I think what took the pressure off a little bit was almost again, this is silly, but I didn't really view it as anything. I think sometimes you can over hype something. And I was like, there are athletes that go out there and run 20 milers for their long run and they don't really think much of it. And for me, because there was no pressure on the marathon in terms of time or anything, I was like, do what you usually do, fuel up to it and just get there and treat it as a long run. And obviously on the day it went well, but it could have gone completely wrong. And with regards to nutrition during the event, I basically gave some gels to my mates who were standing on the course, managed to get like half of one down because I'd not done any practice with any gels, and it was the most ridiculous thing ever. I couldn't running at that pace and trying to get it was just impossible. So in the end, I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna have to crack on here. Didn't take another one, and then only by about mile 20 to obviously start getting a little bit of a headache. So I took some water on, and that's it. And yeah, I don't know how I managed to get round, but I did.
do me
Um,
have a job here. You do me have a job here,
oh,
Rowan.
I mean, honestly, and that's the thing. Like another day, I would have completely bonked and it would have been catastrophic. I think I got super lucky, and also, irregardless of whether you get round, could you have felt even better? Could you have recovered better the next day? Obviously, everyone does nutrition during a marathon. It's stupid not to. I just think I went into it in such a naive mindset that it almost was just, yeah.
So then what happened off the back of that? Because you've just finished top 40, top 60, depending on the ones you view. You're 19 years of age. Tell me if I'm wrong. There must be a bit of a buzz around. So yeah, what happened next?
I mean, honestly, I always describe that as like the best day of my life because genuinely, I think because I was so young, like you get back to your phone and it's like, people are messaging you like they're like, this is a very, very good run. You have a great future ahead of you and things like that. People you've not spoken to in a long time. And I'm just in central London, the weather's good. I'm in my mind, I'm jumping to conclusions. I'm like, I
Yeah.
made it here. Quit everything, stop everything. I am going to be the future star. And again, because I felt so good, I was like, I could have run so much quicker today. And everyone's like, oh, when did it start to hurt? And I was like, it did. And this isn't me being arrogant. This is generally just me being in that sort of shape and the time I ran and how I kind of viewed it. I was like, I didn't really hurt that much. Like I was actually feel great. But again, I don't think that really helped me going forward because then the next week in my mind I was automatically a marathon runner and I was only 20 at the time. So it wasn't really the best mindset to be in. So barely took any time off and was just straight back into training. And that was pretty much, I would say, not my downfall, but in a way when things started to actually go wrong was 2, 3 weeks after the marathon.
And what kind of symptoms came around from yeah to show
So
that
I
you
actually, yeah, so my actual first ever kind of like niggle injury and super rare for me because I was never someone that got mad amounts of injuries. Basically had like a high hamstring tendinopathy which wouldn't go away. So basically every time I'd run, my leg would just be doing. I could run through it a little bit, but it just wasn't going away. And like, I did a bit of training. I was like, this is just not going away. And I kind of wanted to rest up and then do a track season, but it just wasn't really possible. So I think by kind of midsummer, I just couldn't run basically. But obviously, like I wanted to run so badly, so a lot of the time I was just trying it, running it, doing everything I could, but it just wasn't going away. So in the end, there was times I couldn't run when obviously I really wanted to.
and what were your coaches and people saying around you? So obviously there's a hype. You've done really well. You're still doing high training level. Was anyone going to you like, Rowan, you're quite slight here. You know, there's a fine line. We're worried about injury. We're worried about health. Any of those sorts of conversations had?
Not really, because by that point, obviously, I'd already done. I'd achieved something over a marathon, so everyone was kind of like, "Oh, this is how it needs to be," or just I think people were probably a little bit just unaware of maybe the issue. By that point, no one really had any. I hadn't really spoken to anyone properly about any of my issues anyway. So I think most people. It's funny because when I speak to people now, they're like, "Oh, of course, should have put two and two together." But at that point, people aren't really going to raise issues, and especially with a male as well. I think it was just so unknown. No one was really asking too many questions. They just assumed I ran a lot, which I did.
And I guess like we're talking about low energy availability, which has only kind of probably been a bit of a buzz, and relative energy deficiency. It's been a buzz sort of last 5 years, and then kind of disordered eating disorders that are associated with this space. Can you just allude to and give us an indication about what you were doing from a fueling perspective in terms of that control element? And then I know we've spoken about it many times. Luckily enough, Rowan comes and does a talk for us at our uni about this magic weight space that is kind of floating around. I don't know if it's still there in endurance sport.
Um, I think yeah, the word control is probably the best word to describe it because I think people always associate it with oh, you just didn't eat, but I actually did eat. I've always eaten. I've never stopped eating, never really missed meals or anything. But if you start to run 90 miles a week, you'd be surprised by how much you need to eat to fuel yourself. Especially for someone that's already underweight who probably needs to gain weight and has clearly not hit any sign of or at least finished puberty. You know what I mean? I was still so I didn't look anywhere near my counterparts. So there was a lot of energy that I needed basically. So yeah, I was eating like breakfast, lunch, dinner, would have snacks, but they'd be so controlled to the point that I ate the same thing every single day because in my mind my weight would stay the same if I ate the same food and did exactly the same training. So every single week I did the same training, the same mileage where I could or more, and ate the same thing every single day. And it was typical stuff. Like I'd eat porridge, I'd eat pasta, things like that, but it was just not enough. And I was always wanting to undereat rather than the fear of overeating, if that makes sense. Like I never want to feel full. I'd almost love the feeling of seeing other people around me eating more than me because in my mind I was thinking, oh, that's detrimental to their running. So it's loads of little things, but a lot of it is just purely about the control of and again, yeah, alluding to the weight, like said before, like there's definitely a weight you can get to which is super light, which you feel amazing at, but it's so short term lived. And I think for me, for a while, I was able to hit that weight and feel amazing. And if you don't get injured, you're so light. And if you're obviously fueling enough, you can kind of get away with it for a bit. But it's so detrimental to like long term success, long term health that you can win a couple of medals, get a few PBs and stuff, but it's just not worth it at all, to be honest.
And I guess in that sense, like if we've got a bit of a way up here, should we weigh our athletes? Should we not? Is that an important metric? If you're controlling, a lot of athletes control it. The idea behind controlling our lifestyle, we're kind of almost robotic in our approach to what we do in training. We want to be as professional as possible. So we know that things like orthorexia or control of dietary intake are quite common. when our performance improves, but actually our health markers quietly or under the radar are getting worse, that's a difficult thing. And we've heard about it anecdotally in endurance sports before, where people getting lighter, they're maybe not optimizing their fueling, but actually their outputs are actually getting better until a point.
I
Did you?
think solely down to the athlete as well. I think me and Ellis are a great comparison because if you were to say to Ellis, we need to weigh you once a week, whatever that weight said, it wouldn't change his whole mindset about the way he eats. He might say, oh, I need to maybe eat a little bit healthier and clean up my diet a little bit, but he's not going to suddenly cut all food groups out. Do you know what I mean? So I think massively depends on the sort of athlete you are. And again, Ellis is a professional athlete, so yeah, of course, I'm sure at some point that's needed. But as long as those sorts of metrics aren't going to change your entire personality, then obviously they are super useful. But I think you'd be surprised a lot. I would say there are probably quite a few professional athletes out there that don't use weight as a marker. I would say they probably go by how they feel because again, I think because of the knowledge around this area nowadays, I think a lot of coaches and kind of carers would be a little bit careful about introducing weight as a definitive marker as to where someone's at. So I think there are probably people that do it, but I think definitely the listeners of this would be surprised how many don't do it. And I know of professional athletes that definitely don't weigh themselves or would never use that as a marker.
I think it's about holistic understanding of the
Yeah,
body, right? So we have enough
exactly.
symptoms, like you had your hamstring issues, your performance is going well. There's no indication you've lost loads of weight, you're not fit into clothes or vice versa. So I think there's a big narrative around how we use weight if we are going to use it. And unfortunately, there's a big stigma associated with weight. In society, it's you get on the scales, you want to be lighter, normally 9 times out of 10. Then athletes aren't always told, about muscle mass, about hormone function, about all these other things. So I completely agree with what you're saying. I don't think that's necessarily. We shouldn't be focusing in on just an isolated metric when it should be used in kind of holistic athlete
Yeah.
support and care. So can you talk us through kind of you had the injuries, you had the niggles, you were controlling your dietary intake. So how did it come around that you needed to get some support?
Yeah, well, obviously, in my head, I already knew I'd had issues in the past as well. So I think by the time I was obviously getting injuries and stuff, but the problem is because I couldn't run, I was therefore cutting food down even further. And so probably look at photos of me in 2017. So kind of time where I'd done my marathon, moved on to the next year, but wasn't really running loads. But when I could run, I'd run a long way because I think I need to make up for it. But by this point, I was cutting food quite a bit. So I think in 2017, from looking at photos, I was probably the lightest I'd ever been, which is weird because I was probably running a lot less than I had been. Um, but again, I was just trying to run where I could. Um, so yeah, I think by 2017, end of 2017 on to 2018, I think by that point my body had kind of given up anyway because even when I wasn't injured, I just couldn't. I'd wake up in the mornings and I'd just feel lethargic. I just couldn't get myself going, and the thought of going to a session or a run was just, yeah, even like brain fog. I think in my mind, I view it as a time when my body was just suddenly, you know what, this is the time you need to now start to fuel me. I need to grow, you need to recover, everything like that. So I think very quickly between 2018, 2019 onto 2020, I started to gain weight, but it was almost a forced hand really because I wasn't really able to run. My body just didn't move in the same way. It was weird. It was quite a weird thing to describe. Yeah, it was almost, I think I grew a little bit, so it almost became a bit uncoordinated. It was weird. I didn't feel flowy when I ran. Almost felt like I was taking up a new sport every time I went for a run. Couldn't really get consistent training, so overall weekly mileage just wasn't that high. So that kind of coupled with a bit more food, I obviously started to improve and obviously nourish my brain a little bit. So you start to kind of think a little bit clearer, I think.
And how hard was that from someone who's, a couple of years prior had all of this noise around them, you've done so well to then go in, well, I can't run. Was it as a matter of
Yeah.
really physically you can't run, or was it a matter of you having people in your corner saying, Rowan, like this is the time that I'm not letting you run? Did you have a bit of both?
People would make comments and stuff, but it was mainly because I would love to have run. Like, and actually, like I always say to people, the hardest part I found with any of my issues was the aftermath of it. So the periods where I couldn't run, where I was eating more, and where I was gaining weight. Because the problem is, if you're someone that's been light for so long, I love the feeling of people telling me, "Oh, you're really lean, Rowan. You look super light. You look race ready." Those sorts of comments that people would just say over the years. To them being told, oh, you look different. Oh, you look healthy. You look you look good. Like things like that for someone that's had an eating issue are very hard to they're hard to hear because in your head you're just thinking I'm overweight, I'm big, but people are so used to seeing you super light that any sort of weight you've put on, they're going to think, oh Jesus, like he looks a lot because I did look a lot different because I went from looking like a 13-year-old boy to looking like I should be looking. So obviously it's a big jump up, but in your head it's catastrophic. So yeah, like for a good time, yeah, 4 or 5 years afterwards, it was tough because I was hearing and see people I hadn't seen for a while, and then obviously you just prep yourself because you knew. But again, like you had to ride the wave really because I couldn't stay looking like I was forever. It was ridiculous. So yeah,
You know, it's such an important part of your life where fortunately you're on the other side of it, and like it feels like kind of intuitively your body was telling you what to do to a degree. Obviously
yeah.
there was support in there along the way, but yeah, thankfully you're in a good place now. I guess we'll discuss about kind of the environment around endurance sport because I know you're still involved in it. But where are we at now? So where have you from that point? Much healthier, better relationship with food. So, what are your kind of goals now? I know you're not typically like an Ellis cross athlete, if you like, but so where are we at?
Yeah, so obviously my luckily my job revolves around running still, but the other end of the spectrum. So it actually works out super well because I attend a lot of run clubs, a lot of events that are community based. So I'm still in touch with running and I still run as part of my job and it keeps me what I say is fit. And for me, being fit and healthy is obviously important. I think, I've still got that mindset where I like being in shape and things like that, but I think it does take the pressure off a little bit. But obviously I have friends that still compete like Ellis, so I'm very much in touch with the elite side of the sport as well, which I think is good, but I think at the same time it would probably be better for me to remove myself entirely from professional or elite running because you've always got that drive in your head to kind of,
The
you
move.
know, yeah, I want to run, I want to compete. There's no reason why I can't, but the problem is I would never have a healthy relationship with, I couldn't run 100 miles a week and have a healthy relationship with the way I ate. And for me, I'm very much an all or nothing person. If I'm going to commit to running, I'd commit 100% to it. So, I think in being wise, it's a better option just to kind of be like, I've done that, I've achieved that. Now I've got a career I love, a job I love. You can kind of put all your eggs in that in a way.
I think it's probably a good nod to say about, your relationship with Ellis, even though he's not here, but I'm sure he won't mind us kind of bigging him up a little bit. But you two had formed kind of best friends relationship, both good quality athletes, and his relationship with food is so much more relaxed and chill that actually it probably helped you out along the way. If I'm not speaking for you, what do you think?
Yeah, no, of course. I always say this, like people I was living with, and Ellis definitely was one of them. And obviously, you can kind of see what Ellis has gone on to do. And I think me and Ellis, in a way, started in the same position, but our relationships with food was the polar opposite. And if you look at where we've gone, we've pretty much gone the opposite way from one another. And if you actually use that as evidence based as to why would you say Ellis has gone on to do that, and I would say that's down to the fact when he got to university, he wasn't swayed by the training other people were doing. He was focused on what he was doing and he knew that at that point he didn't need to suddenly ramp up his training. He ate what he wanted to an extent, as you know, he wasn't very switched on at that point with his nutrition.
Five
I'm sure.
Soleros, five
Exactly,
Soleros,
yeah,
Farrow.
exactly. And he would say the same thing. He'd happily allow me to speak for him on that. And I think that relaxed attitude through university allowed him to grow as a person as well because uni's not always about running. So I think he was able to do that, but then also push on with his running, hence why he was double national champion. And then once he left university and onto what he's doing now, he's definitely a lot more switched on about it 100%. But at the same time, he's not got hang-ups about it.
So if I was to say to you, this is quite a loaded question here, Rowan, but if I was to say to you, we can go back to when you're 19, your coach says to you, I want you to run the marathon, and then you don't run that marathon. Would you take that on, or would you say, well, actually, everything I've experienced has put me in a good position now to be able to, share these strong messages, to write blogs, which we're going to share with the viewers, and to have an impact, to help other people moving forward too.
Yeah, if I knew what I knew now back then, I wouldn't run the marathon at all. I would say if I could have one wish, it would be to go, and it genuinely would be, I would wish, obviously like a personal wish, I would wish to go back to around that sort of time and basically change my entire, not entire life, but my entire kind of course of my running career, just because, yeah, I could have achieved so much more just from making some more logical choices. And I think the reason I'm not running now is because of those silly choices. I mean, and I think that's a fact, like for sure.
Can you share with the non-running viewer why anecdotally otherwise people don't do marathons young? Because like from a lay audience, we're going, well, young people are fit and healthy. Surely we can peak around that time. But why is it that we have to take our time to get mileage up?
Yeah, I think nowadays people do marathons younger, but the problem is being 19, 20. A training load, you're probably doing a lot. It depends on where you've come from. But that by that point, to be doing enough to warrant doing a good marathon, you're going to be having to do a substantial amount of training. Another thing is the problem is the mindset, and I think that's what I found hard was, oh, I'm a marathon runner now. How can I then go back to doing stuff on the track when I'm already done a marathon? When actually at that sort of age, that's the best time to be running on the track because you're fast. You know what I mean? You can peak for your kind of mid-distance events in your 20s, but for your marathon, you can peak in your 30s. So you're kind of it's advantageous to run on the track more as a youngster. And also by that point, you don't necessarily know what your best event is. So going through your early 20s, you should be kind of doing a little bit of everything and starting to realize what your best event is and focusing on that. And that's rarely going to be the marathon. Um, so I think there's a few things, but definitely kind of training load and then training load after the marathon as well. I think it's just quite hard. And I just think, yeah, I think certain people's body, I think 20 is still really young. I don't necessarily think people's bodies are always ready to run a marathon at 20.
I think we were talking to Ellis about this. I know there's crossover we're talking about this, so do please listen to his podcast too. But he's working towards marathon, right? He's doing a lot of sort of 10Ks, 5Ks, getting that body used to just doing that load at that capacity, at that intensity, to then hopefully step up, and therefore it makes you a bit more robust, hopefully, with everything else being, aligned and stepwise improvement in what we do to fuel the body because it becomes more important and we do more mileage. And as you've already alluded to really nicely in this chat. Cool. Rowan, I really appreciate your time. Just the last few bits. So, advice for young athletes that might find themselves in a similar position to you did when you turned up to university, as a good athlete, a top athlete, and then going into these environments. What would you say? Or about in general advice as well?
Yeah, I think modeling yourself off good athletes is a very good thing to do. And I think that's one thing I was lucky with, as I had great athletes around me, but I didn't necessarily listen to what they were kind of telling me or what they were doing, even though they were better athletes than I was. So I still was, although I was kind of listening a little bit, I was still stuck in my ways. Whereas actually, if I'd taken a step back and thought, you know what, this guy's Euro champ and he's just playing FIFA and he's eating this and he's doing that, he's not going to bed at this time and having to get up at this time, silly o'clock just to go for it. Do you know what I mean? I think looking a little bit more outwardly at what other people are doing and not just focusing on what you want to see. I think when I was younger, I loved to see, oh, that runner's really skinny and they probably don't eat very much. So that's what I'm going to channel him. Where actually, if you take a step back and look at the wider consensus of good athletes, you'd be surprised how many of them don't live this kind of religious lifestyle that you think they do. So I think definitely kind of not looking for what you want to see and actually trying to find what your brain almost doesn't want to see, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think it's really good advice. It's really challenging, isn't it? Like
Yeah.
because in the first kind of couple of decades of life, everyone's trying to kind of find out who they are, and then when they go to uni, it's another opportunity to reinvent yourself. And pressures are so real that this ties in hugely with our psychological element of diet, of intake, body image, just psychology in general too. So we obviously haven't got the capacity, it's outside of my scope to really talk about that. But I think it's really important. Yeah, can we lean on people that have been there and done it? Can we take an outside lens in? And yeah, I think that's really good. Last question for me, and we're going to go fast forward now. So, and this is just a bit of fun for a bit of nutrition stuff. One food, Rowan, that if I said to you, you couldn't live without, what would it be? I'm not, this is no judgment at all as
I don't
well.
know. My friend's gonna laugh, but I had a habit when I was younger of always eating like the Muller rice puddings.
Oh yeah.
For some reason, that's now stuck with me. So it's something I eat every single day. And I don't know why, but I have one of them a day, and it's such a weird thing to enjoy, but I absolutely love them. And so I would definitely say that, although it's not like the most amazing
No,
food,
no, no.
I eat them all the time and they're always in the fridge. So
Is
it's
there a
definitely the
particular
best.
is there a particular flavor? Are we going to try and
Yeah,
find
the
something
apple
away?
the apple flavored ones I absolutely love.
Warmed up or not?
Used to warm up. No, I have them cold now, but warm is good. Warm is
Yeah.
very good.
Okay. Oh, nice, nice. I'll have to
Yeah,
try and get myself hold of some of that.
yeah, they're good.
Rowan, really appreciate the time. Always so good talking to you. And I think it's so important for people like you to share this story, having been there and gone through the other side of it. Because, from what we see at St. Mary's, and I'm sure this is across the country and not just exclusive to running either, sharing messages, having these kind of lived experiences can be really powerful. So really appreciate your openness. I will share with the viewers your blog if that's okay. And if
Yeah.
people wanted to get in touch with you, is it Instagram or what's
Instagram's fine. Yeah, just drop me a message on Instagram. I've had a few once about the blog and stuff, and yeah, we'll definitely get back to them.
lovely? Cheers, Ryan. Appreciate it.